Many virtual instruments, including Native Instruments Session Horns Pro, give you a number of optional key switches that let you play different articulations. Articulations are different ways of playing a note or phrase on a horn, and each instrument has its own unique ways to coax different tones out of it. Let's take a look at some examples, starting with the trumpet. First of all instruments can be played with or without vibrato. Usually during a longer held out note, a player will use some vibrato, which is basically an air and pitch fluctuation that has a bit of a relaxing effect. Here's a note with vibrato. And here's a note without vibrato. Another common technique with horn players is called a crescendo, where the note sounds with a sharp attack and then the volume goes down to almost nothing and then swells back up. Here's what it sounds like. A grace note is when a player plays the note just under the one they want to hit to lead into that note. Here's one without vibrato. And here's one with vibrato. A growl is a sort of distorted note that sounds a little more aggressive than a normal one, as the player intentionally overblows to cause distortion. A player also sometimes plays notes with a very sharp attack and release, often to play several notes very fast and rhythmic. This is called a staccato note, and is used quite often in upbeat music like funk. A rip is a note that starts several notes down and comes up to the intended one. It's like a bunch of grace notes together. And in the case of trumpet players will often shake their instrument to fluctuate between two notes a second or a third away. That sounds like this. Many of these different articulations are meant to spice up a horn performance instead of just playing a normal note that doesn't do very much. They are used to accent certain parts. The way the key switches work is an octave or two below the playable range of an instrument. One can play different keyboard keys to switch the articulation in real time. This is helpful mainly if someone wants to have one track do all the trumpet articulations. For example, they can record or insert a key switch so they can switch to staccato or shake and then switch back to regular notes after they're done with those. It can help to keep the session a little tidier since you don't have to have a separate lane for each different articulation. That said, I personally recommend using separate lanes if your computer can handle the extra instruments, because it's good to have more control over the volumes between the different ones. Also, sometimes you may want to layer them since one horn player may be playing a note with vibrato and the other horn player may be playing without vibrato. So I will show you using that method. I just create a new instrument track and select the articulation I want to use for that track. Here's a track I added with some trumpet shakes during the second half of the piece. Here's the original without. And here it is with the two trumpet shake lanes. I faded those out as well at the end. I've also got a lane that has rips in it. And last but not least, here's a track with sax rips in it also. So the point is, if you listen to most live players, they're constantly changing the way they play their notes, and using these different articulations on a horn virtual instrument helps a lot to make it sound much more realistic. If you don't want to use an extra track for every single articulation, you can use the key switches for two that have earlier and later notes playing, and just record the key switch each time you want to change the articulation. You have to actually record it into the track, because if you don't do that, then as soon as you switch it to a different one, it's not going to go back automatically. You have to make sure to actually put the key switch in for the first note too, because when you get to the last note, if it changes to a different articulation and then you rewind it, it's not going to know to go back to the one that you wanted the first note. Thanks so much for watching.